Ever feel like you're just drowning in headlines? Like trying to keep up with the stock market and politics and tech all at the same time? It's a lot.
Yeah, it can be pretty overwhelming.
So today, we're going to try to make sense of it all. We're going to look at 4 big things that might seem totally separate, but we're going to see if we can find some connections.
Sounds good to me.
We'll dive into what's happening with stocks, specifically some potential threats for investors.
Right.
We'll unpack the latest in the, let's call it the ongoing saga of former President Trump and, well, judges and universities.
Always something going on there.
Then we'll see what's up with Elon Musk and, well, some interesting choices he's making. And finally, we'll try to decipher the Federal Reserve's latest moves.
It is a lot, but I think we can break it down.
Hopefully. And you know the drill. You sent us a bunch of really interesting articles, and we're going to use those as our guide.
Exactly.
The goal here is to give you the key takeaways so you can actually, understand what's going on without having to read a million different things.
Yeah, efficiency is key.
So let's jump right in. Maybe a good place to start is with the economic side of things, particularly what's happening with the stock market and the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, there are some pretty interesting signals there, some of which could mean some choppy waters ahead for investors.
Like what? What are you seeing?
Well, we've got a bit of a mixed bag, honestly.
Mixed bag how?
I mean, you've got some companies doing well, others not so much.
Right.
And the overall market seems a bit jumpy.
Like with NIO.
Exactly. NIO, the Chinese EV maker.
Their sales are up, right?
Yeah.
I saw that in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, but so are their losses, which is a little worrisome.
Huh.
It seems their costs are growing faster than their revenue, so, not a great sign.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what this means for the whole EV market, especially as competition heats up.
Absolutely. And speaking of competition and some not so great news, the wider stock market had a bit of a roller coaster week, too. Yeah.
Big names like Nike and FedEx took a hit after their earnings report.
Oh, right. I saw that. Didn't meet expectations. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you have the 10-year Treasury yield, which has been dropping.
Now, remind me, what does that usually mean?
Well, typically, when the yield on the 10-year Treasury goes down, it suggests that investors might be getting a little more cautious.
Okay.
Maybe they're looking for safer havens, like government bonds.
Right.
Or it could even signal that they're anticipating some kind of economic slowdown.
Interesting. So you've got some stocks taking a beating, but at the same time, this potential move towards safer investments.
Right. And to make things even more interesting, this isn't just a U.S. thing. We're seeing stock declines in Europe, China, and Japan, too.
Wow. So kind of a global trend.
Seems like it. But here's the kicker. Copper prices are actually going up.
Really? Why is that significant?
Well, copper is often seen as a sign of industrial activity, so rising prices could mean that some sectors of the global economy are actually doing pretty well. So it's like these two opposite trends happening at the same time. Falling stocks, but rising copper prices.
Exactly. And that's where those mixed signals we keep hearing about come into play.
Which is exactly what the Federal Reserve is talking about, right?
Yeah. John Williams, the New York Fed president, basically said holding interest rates steady was the right move for now because the economic picture is so unclear.
So they're in a tough spot, huh?
Absolutely. Trying to figure out what the next move should be.
And on top of all that, the Federal Reserve itself is operating at a loss.
Yeah, that's another layer of complexity.
It grew quite a bit last year, 2024.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal said something about it being because of the interest they're paying out on bank reserves.
Right. They use those reserves to manage the money supply and, influence interest rates. But right now, those payments are exceeding the income they're getting from their bond portfolio.
So they're paying out more than they're bringing in. What does that even mean for us, for everyday people?
While it doesn't mean the Fed is going to shut down or anything drastic like that, it does potentially limit their flexibility in the future.
How so?
If they're worried about their own finances, they might be more hesitant to take strong action if the economy takes a downturn.
I see.
Basically, their profitability depends on how interest rates change compared to the yields on the bonds they hold.
So the high interest rates right now, which are supposed to help fight inflation, are kind of backfiring on them.
In a way, yes.
Okay, so let's try to put this all together. We've got some shaky performance in the stock market, especially with companies like NIO.
Right.
Then there's this maybe risk-averse signal from the Treasury yield. And finally, you've got the Federal Reserve being super cautious and dealing with their own financial issues. What does this mean for investors? Is it time to panic?
It's definitely a time to be cautious. The struggles of some companies and the Fed's hesitation, it all points to a lot of uncertainty and potential for things to change quickly. For investors, I think it reinforces the importance of diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket and really think about how much risk you're comfortable with.
Solid advice. All right, so the economic landscape is looking a little, well, a little rocky right now.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something completely different, but equally interesting. The former president, his actions, his statements regarding the judiciary, it's, uh, it's definitely keeping things interesting,
That's certainly a direct challenge to the way things are usually done.
for sure. This whole thing with him calling for the impeachment of a district court judge, that was a big deal.
That was a pretty bold move.
And then the Chief Justice issuing a rare public statement defending the judiciary. I mean, that's not something you see every day.
Not at all. To have the head of a former branch of government clashing so publicly with the head of the judicial branch, it's pretty unusual.
Definitely. And it wasn't just that one instance, right?
No, there was also that Truth Social post where he criticized radical and highly partisan judges
Uh-huh.
and urged the Supreme Court to get involved.
I saw that one.
It's all part of this pattern of direct criticism and calling for intervention that really pushes the boundaries of, how separate the different branches of government are supposed to be.
The separation of powers, yeah.
Yeah,
It feels like a deliberate effort to test those limits.
it does. And then you have his administration's efforts to change things within the federal bureaucracy.
Oh, right, like reclassifying federal personnel,
Yep.
firing inspectors general, and that whole thing about streamlining the workforce.
Exactly. It was all about trying to increase executive control. But as we've seen, there's been pushback.
Oh, yeah, the courts have definitely stepped in a few times.
Right. There was that case where a federal judge was really concerned about using wartime powers to deport Venezuelan gang members.
They questioned whether that was even legal, right?
Exactly. And then in another case, a judge ordered the reinstatement of a fired member of the National Labor Relations Board.
Wow. So even though he's not in office anymore, his actions are still having a ripple effect.
Definitely. These cases show how the judiciary is supposed to act as a check on the executive branch's power, even after they've left office.
And it's not just the courts he's had run-ins with, right? There's also the whole thing with universities.
Right. The Wall Street Journal covered that. Columbia University basically gave in to certain demands after they lost some federal funding.
They agreed to, limit protests, change admissions policies, and even create a K-12 curriculum.
Yeah, it was pretty significant. It raises questions about how much autonomy universities actually have.
It seems like a lot of control.
And there's also the case of the University of Pennsylvania, where federal funding was paused because of concerns about a trans swimmer competing.
Right, and those letters sent to law firms about their diversity programs.
It all suggests a pretty concerted effort to influence what universities and similar organizations are doing, using things like federal funding and scrutiny as leverage.
So for our listener who's interested in understanding different points of view and wants to see these institutions thriving, how do these conflicts affect them?
Well, the big issue here is the independence of these institutions. We need a strong and impartial judiciary for the rule of law to work.
Right.
If people think the courts are just giving in to political pressure, they're going to lose trust in the whole legal system.
That makes sense.
And the same goes for universities. They need to be free to explore ideas and encourage debate. If they have to follow political agendas to get funding, that hurts academic freedom and limits the diversity of thought.
So it's kind of a power struggle, with the executive branch trying to assert control over these other institutions.
Yeah, you could say that.
And speaking of power struggles and interesting figures, let's talk about Elon Musk. What's going on with him these days?
It's fascinating how his personal life and political views seem to be getting more intertwined with his businesses.
It's definitely making things complicated.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing where President Trump said Musk wouldn't get a sensitive briefing about a possible conflict with China.
Yeah, because of Musk's financial ties to Beijing. Right.
Right. That's a pretty big statement, saying there are national security concerns about his business dealings.
It highlights the issues that come up when business leaders have global operations and allegiances.
It's a tricky balance, for
Yeah.
sure. And then there's Tesla, his most famous company, which has seen its stock price plummet.
Yeah, that's been a big story. And then there was that massive Cybertruck recall.
Right, so it's been kind of a rough patch for him lately.
It seems like a lot of things are contributing to inventor concerns. There's this growing feeling that his involvement with the Trump administration and his let's say, outspoken personality might be distracting him from Tesla.
Right, like all those people he fired and his interesting social media posts.
Exactly. And we've even seen protests at Tesla locations, so there's definitely some public dissatisfaction.
But then again, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, publicly recommended buying Tesla stock.
Yeah, so it's not all negative. Plenty of people still believe in Tesla and Musk's vision. But the Wall Street Journal also had stories about people who sold their Tesla stocks specifically because of Musk's actions and image.
It's crazy how much a leader's personality can affect a company's stock price.
It shows that investors are paying attention to more than just the numbers. They're thinking about a company's values and its leaders' behavior, too.
So what does all this tell us about how business, politics, and public opinion are all mixing together these days?
It seems like there's a growing expectation for business leaders to think about their wider impact, both politically and socially.
Right, like people are voting with their wallets.
Exactly. Consumers and investors are making decisions based on these factors. What a leader does and says outside of their business can really impact their company now.
Makes you wonder what would happen if, things had gone differently.
It's hard to say, but it's definitely something to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about the uncertainty in the stock market, the power struggles between different branches of government and universities, and the changing perception of Elon Musk. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but hopefully seeing how these seemingly separate events connect helps make sense of it all.
And just to be clear, we're not taking sides on any of this.
Right, we're just laying out the information from the articles you sent.
Exactly.
The goal is to understand what's happening and how it might all be connected.
So to summarize, we've got some potential trouble in the EV market, a volatile stock market with interest rates staying put, some challenges to how independent our government institutions are, and a pretty big shift in how people view a major tech company and its leader.
And you, our listener, now have a better understanding of all these important developments.
And hopefully some food for thought about how to navigate this crazy information landscape.
Absolutely.
Because when you think about it, all these things, the economic signals, the political tension, the way public opinion is changing, it makes you wonder, what does it all mean for you? What assumptions do you need to re-examine? And how should you make decisions in your own life, whether it's about your finances or anything else?
It's a lot to consider.
It is. This is just a snapshot of what's happening right now. These stories are going to keep evolving, so staying informed is more important than ever.
I completely agree.
So keep those news feeds coming, and we'll be back next time to break it all down again.
Sounds good.
Until then, thanks for listening.
And thanks for all the great articles.
See you next time.